Brother Paul.
Hey Dillon, how you doing?
How are you? I'm all right, brother. How are you?
I'm real well, thanks. Thanks for getting up so early to hang out with me.
Not at all. It's already been quite a morning. Sorry to have sent you that email at such short notice. I thought I might need a few more minutes, but actually we're all good. How's things with you, buddy?
Yeah, they're really great, thank you.
Good man.
Just to show you that I'm real human, I put video on, but we can continue in audio just to protect the...
Yeah, can you see me?
I can't see you. I can see your picture. Sounds like you're outside in the sun, though. I can hear birds singing.
It's absolutely remarkable. I'm in a phase at the moment, a heavy training phase.
Oh,
there you go. So I've had quite an intense swim and a run this morning. And just outside the health club, it is just spectacular, really is spectacular. And there's beyond those trees, there's a river and then massive lakes where I go paddleboarding. So this area is it's phenomenal. You must come over at some stage.
I will be. Pascal and I will be over in July, August next year with our what will be by then 6 or 7 month girl child.
Congratulations! So, very good.
I'll be visiting.
So what you're due in a few months, are you now?
Yeah, in December. Yeah.
Wow! Awesome! Excited
and terrified.
Of course. I think that's a feeling we're supposed to have with all of our biggest goals, isn't it? Excited and terrified.
The
heart racing, arse twitching.
The physical feeling of either is about the same. Of exciting and
yeah, I bet. Is it first?
It is the first.
Very good, man.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, listen, very, very best of luck with that. I'm sure you'll both do remarkably well. No doubt.
Look, thanks for jumping on. And this is not part of the recording or anything, but man, honestly, it's just such an absolute pleasure to talk to you face to face. And I've been part of the group for a while. I've been kind of quiet, and I've jumped in and then out. But I'm midway through my webinar build. I've got this project idea we're going to launch in Japan, coaching program in Japan. So I've got my business partner lives there.
Right.
It's well and truly moving forward. So just to let you know, I'm still in there, and I'll publish my results as soon as we've launched the first webinar, which is intended for late this year. So yeah, thanks.
Good man, Paul. Good man. And listen, I mean, you I don't need to say this, but you just reach out anytime you need. You know, however far behind you might feel you are, you're never behind. Things happen when they're supposed to happen. So whenever you're ready, you don't feel that the window's closed or the time has passed. Gemma, myself, the team, we're always here to help you make that happen. All right, buddy. So just don't worry at all.
Love it. And we'll mention the webinar. Is webinars of mass domination now? Is that the?
Yeah, but actually we've had a massive pivot, you might call it. And this is the first interview that I've done since the pivot, and I've got quite a few lined up. So I'm likewise, very, very grateful to have been asked to be interviewed and to speak to you face to face. It is likewise an honour. And so this year's been one of those years. I haven't had a year like this since probably about 2008. And I kind of am feeling that perhaps it's a once in a decade occurrence, where you're riding high, things are going really well, and you're constantly improving, or certainly constantly failing and learning. And then something happens and you realize that you are so far off track and you don't really know how you got there. You perhaps made a few small, seemingly insignificant decisions, and you thought at the time that they were the right decisions, but actually they turn out to send you totally off track. And that's exactly what I've found over the last, probably not long. It went ballistic in 2013. By 2015, middle of 2015, I'd kind of, in essence, said to the universe, look, thank you very much for all that success, but you obviously don't know what I need. Fuck you. I'm going to go and do something else. And that's exactly what I did. And what happened, Paul, was I've had some fairly, I guess, early acclaim as an online trader. So I was featured in one of the broadsheets back in 2002 and so on and so forth. And trading has always been my thing. But what I've found is I've worn a real kind of pseudo-moral badge of honor that placed me against traders, against the financial services industry, against banking,
capitalism.
But at this, totally. And it was a real. I wore it as this badge of honor. I am different to everybody else. I'm different to the other traders. I don't want anything to do with you. I don't want anything to do with the industry. And actually, no matter how good I am at this thing, I'm going to give it up. And I found that's happened to me a couple of times in my life. And the most significant of those times, apologies, somebody wheeling past with the most significant of those times was in the middle of 2015. And I decided, after years and years and years of trying to make something work, I decided, having made something work and got, in essence, all of my dreams delivered to me on a plate. These dreams of making inordinate sums of money, and then being able to give away, in essence, Paul. You know me, I don't say this to blow smoke up my ass or anything like that. But in essence, giving away hundreds of thousands of pounds as if it were pocket change, that's just a fucking dream come true. It really was. But I decided actually that I should do something else. And what I should do, instead of building my own business, is teach other people how to build their businesses online. Because obviously I'd built mine online and we'd launched loads of products by now. And so I got kind of sidetracked. And I guess coming full circle back to your question around webinars of mass domination, and I'm all right for any of that to go in the recording, by the way. Coming back to your question around webinars of mass domination, it's a fabulous program. We've had some great results. I feel it's one of the best webinar trainings in the marketplace, but it was a real distraction from what I do best. And what I do best, Paul, is make money on the markets and teach other people how to make money on the markets with the sole intention of giving it all away, or at least giving the majority of it away without sacrificing, our own quality of life. That's what I do best. It's what I've always done best. And quite often, we are so conditioned, I feel, to not do what comes easy. We're conditioned to focus on our weaknesses. We're conditioned to focus on the things that we don't do very well. If you're great at maths and you're great at science, but you're really shit at German, get a German tutor so that you can up your grades in German. If you're really great at history but bad at chemistry, get a chemistry tutor so you can fill in the gaps in chemistry, because you're going to be all right at history anyway. And we're never really taught or conditioned to excel in what comes easy to us. I don't know if I'm making any sense. We're not taught to say, this comes really easy to you. Forget about what you should be doing or what you could be doing. Do what comes easy. And that's been my biggest learning this year. And I've had to go really deep and really low to points of self-loathing that I have not felt for 10 years. And I wouldn't call it depression, but certainly verging on questioning my entire purpose of living and of being here, and what the fuck are we doing, and why am I doing it, and how am I ever going to redistribute all this income? How will we ever make any impact on the Sustainable Development Goals? How are we going to do any of it? And that's brought me full circle back to where we are right now. So look. Wow. Hopefully some of that made sense. Do you know what I mean? Just to give you a bit of background on where I am right now.
Well, hopefully it was also an opportunity for you to articulate it.
Yeah, definitely. And you know that it's very cathartic, and this is why I'm so grateful for being here with you, because it is cathartic talking it through with a brother. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes we can live fairly lonely existences behind our screens, behind our laptops, in beautiful surroundings. But it's fucking lonely sometimes,
Totally is. And what you see on social media is, the connectedness with everyone, but we're still doing it from the, our bedrooms or our offices or whatever.
Correct.
Yeah,
absolutely right.
Look, I mean, the podcast, as you know, it's straight up chat. And there's a variety of sort of concepts I can bring up in that, and that is mental wellness, physical health, and financial wealth. And I think that you and I probably chatting outside your gym, is it, over there that you said?
We're at the health club, right now, yep.
So physical side covered, tick. And the mental wellness and the financial wealth, I think, is everything you do is around that. So if there's anything that we talk about that you want to say, you think, oh, fuck, no, let's just change that. Feel free to start again. I'm thinking 30 to 45 minutes, if that's good for you.
Of course.
Awesome. Do you have any questions for me?
Mate, no, I'm absolutely happy just to have the conversation. And likewise, look, if there's something that you want me to cover deeper, or that I haven't covered in enough detail, or that I've gone a bit off topic on, just bring me back, guide me, lead me. I'm happy just to have the conversation. And I'm sure that out of our conversation, knowing how how our values do interleave and overlap, I think we'll come up with some great content, I hope.
Yeah, it could all go to shit. Let's see. So I guess my first question would be, what drove you to now do, and you kind of just outlined this, but I could always edit it in, but what drove you to do what you love and love what you do?
It was this overriding feeling of being absolutely kind of fed up and destroyed mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually by consistently focusing on weaknesses. And I've had to do that ever since I was a young boy, not through any fault of my parents at all. I love them to pieces, and I feel that they gave me the best start any child could ever hope for. And I know that everybody says that, or certainly most people say that about their parents. But I've had to do that all my life. And some of those examples I mentioned earlier about, if you're great at maths but not great at German, get a German tutor rather than getting a maths tutor who can take you further faster. And that's what I had. My parents sacrificed everything to, get me tutors on subject matters where I wasn't so strong. German was one of them. It's one of the ones I remember. Science was another one. It's one of the ones I remember. I'm very grateful for that. But we didn't come from a background where you excel at one thing, where you do what comes easy. We were brought up in a background, and I think society conditions us all, even now, to focus in on weaknesses. And I just got fed up with it. And I just found that the last couple of years, I've been feeling the same feelings of kind of pushing boulders up steep hills as I was feeling pre-2012 and 13, which is when it really kicked off for me. So I kind of spent, 10 to 15 years pushing boulders up a hill to get to this point where actually things are pretty cool. And I'm not pushing boulders up a hill. And 2012, 13, 14, 15, phenomenal years. And then by the middle of 15, I'd reverted back to form and decided, actually, I feel more comfortable focusing in on my weaknesses. I remember, I'll tell you a quick story, if I might. I remember being at a Tony Robbins Unleash the Power Within event in April, May 2012. So about a year before I had my massive breakthrough. And I'd kind of been invited there as a guest by a friend of mine who'd paid for my ticket. I was still about £107,000 in debt at this stage. And so my ticket was bought for me, and I'd gone along with a really, really good friend of mine, Chris. And Robbins was going through this piece where he was talking about, Dillon, you're working so hard for this success, but actually what's going to happen is all the success that you crave, everything that you're working so hard towards, a couple of years after you get it, you are going to fuck it right up and sabotage the shit out of everything. And of course, he wasn't talking directly to me, but Robbins has a way of making you feel like he's talking to you. And there's 5,000 people in the room. But I remember sitting there, Paul, saying to myself, I have no idea why you are paid so much. And I have no idea why I'm hanging off your every word. You clearly do not know me. You clearly do not know how hard I'm working for this success and how I'm never going to sabotage what I'm working so hard towards. And sure enough, 2013, it all kicked off, went ballistic, had phenomenal breakthroughs, and, literally went from minus £107,000 no income, no impact, no influence, to having, as I said earlier, all of these dreams about making inordinate sums of money and then giving away hundreds of thousands of pounds like it were pocket change. All those dreams came true. And by the middle of 2015, I decided actually all of that was too easy. And I should really focus on doing something that maybe doesn't come so easy. And between 2015 and now it's been revelationary, if that's even a word.
So what it is now? What? Why then? Why the sabotage? Why is that something that we do?
So, of course, look, in retrospect, things are always easy to figure out, and you kind of join the dots in the way that makes sense to you. So I don't know whether this is the answer, but it's certainly the only answer that I can come up with. And I really feel, Paul, it's down to conditioning. I really feel it's down to nobody ever making it okay to focus in on our strengths. I'll give you another example. My wife, she blagged her way into a job before she was 16. She's so resilient. She's such a wonderful human being and a wonderful example of tenacity and commitment and forgiveness and compassion and love, everything. She's perfect. If that doesn't sound too soppy at all, crikey.
Good credit podcast for you. She can listen to it later.
Yeah. But edit that bit in. But so she blagged herself into a job when she was 15, just before she turned 16. She'd got her national insurance card. Anyway, she's been working since she was young. And her natural ability, she is an artist. She trained as a makeup artist with Christian Dior. And that's the bit that she really loved. And in fact, she had like a call center job, but then would go to night school to train in beauty, and then would work evenings on a beauty counter, and then would work weekends in a salon, and then would do other people's nails at home. And that's her. She's hugely creative. And what happened to her was this overwhelming feeling of being judged as being, her words, not mine, a dizzy bitch. And, her whole view was that actually, look, I have to get out of beauty and I have to get into corporate because that's where, that's where I can show my intellect. And she's never really wanted to show her intellect. Yeah, that's where I can get validation. Yeah, that's exactly the right word. And so she did. And for 9 years, she worked in corporate, and she went from a PA to the director of a kind of, it's not really a public sector agency, it's the environment agency here in the UK. And she went from the PA to a director to being the program manager for something like a £4 million program. And so she really applied herself, hated every minute, but applied herself, got the job done, and learned spreadsheets and learned all of this stuff. And again, that was because nobody ever said to her, do you know what, sweetheart? It is okay for you to focus in on what you do best and what comes easy to you, and take that as far as you can, and forget about what other people may or may not think. And I promised her, I remember when we first met, I was 6 figures down, having tried and failed at a lot of stuff. And I remember sitting with her in her car, sharing a flipping McDonald's. We used to eat a lot of McDonald's in those days, horrible, but we used to eat them. And it was we'd share a Veggie Delight supersized meal between the two of us and watch movies on a tiny little smartphone. This is back in 2011-12. And I always used to say to her, as soon as I've made it, sweetheart, I promise you, I will buy you out of your job. I know you hate it. I know you're good at it, but you should be doing what you love doing. And as soon as I've made it, I'll buy you out of your job. We'll do whatever you want to do. And that's, in fact, how we ended up in Australia for 3 months in 2016, because by that stage, I was able to buy her out of her job. She never took the money, by the way, but I at least was able to do that.
How did it feel? And, how did it feel when you could do that?
Yeah, mate, to be able to do it for yourself is phenomenal. To be able to do it for the ones that you really love and that you would sacrifice fucking everything for is just the most remarkable feeling I've ever had in my life. It's the feeling, the same feeling that you get when you buy your refugee parents a second-hand Jaguar, because they'd never take a brand new one. So it's got to be second-hand. It's got to represent value, because they just wouldn't accept a brand new one. But that feeling when my wife handed my mother the keys, those feelings, I don't think anything can come close to. And seeing her now, she spent a year between September 2015 to September 2016. She spent kind of figuring things out, what she wanted to do, and she tried loads of different things, and she now has a very successful semi-permanent makeup salon. She tattoos people's eyebrows on. I'm hoping she'll do something for my hair if and when it ever goes completely. But she watching her do what she loves is phenomenal. And what's more than that, we lost her father not so long ago, during that period, and watching her deal with that and build the business and support her mother and be there for me. Honestly, you just sometimes look at these individuals in your life and think, you've never read a personal development book in your fucking life. You've never been to an event. You've never had to dig deep. You've never had to do any of the stuff that kind of we in our world have had to do. And yet you are just such a shining example to all of us. And yeah, she's a remarkable individual, and watching her bloom it's what I live for, man. It really, really is. It really is.
I love that. And you mentioned your parents there as refugees. So what was life like for your parents in Uganda? Can you tell me a bit about that?
Yeah, I don't really know too much about what life was like, other than what I do know is that they went from living a fairly okay life to being brought to the UK, which was certainly a blessing in disguise looking back, and spending the first few weeks of their life on an army camp in tents, queuing up for food. I remember speaking to the couple who took my parents in. There was a big TV campaign back in '72 when all of this happened. Are you able to take families in? And my parents and my brother was 2 years old at the time, and again, phenomenal human being, has been through a remarkable amount. They were taken in by a family down near Bristol. I remember speaking to Dr. Keith and Elizabeth Townend. This was the couple that took my parents in. And Keith would always tell us a story about how my dad was still in the fluorescent yellow and orange tropical coloured shirt. This is October 1972. He was still in that shirt that he'd flew over in. And my mum and my brother were wrapped up in coats and layers and layers and layers to stay warm. So I don't know what life was like for them in Uganda. It's not something that they've really discussed. My dad started kind of written a lot about it, but hasn't discussed a huge amount about it. But I do know that their entry point into the UK was one that I would personally, I think I'd fall to pieces if that shit happened to me. And I'm hoping I wouldn't, obviously. But just thinking about how young they were, how they'd already built quite a life. They'd been married for a few years. They'd had a 2-year-old son by now. They were fairly settled. If I think back to how my wife and I are now, 4 or 5 years into marriage, if we were to get thrown out of the country and have to start again with nothing, and all of that at gunpoint in fairly scary times, I don't know what I'd do. I really don't know what I'd do.
It's because I mean I've changed countries. I was born in the UK and travelled around, but that was my choice. I chose to fly to Australia, New Zealand, and so on. And it's bloody hard. It's hard to change country, even Western countries where English is the first language. But yeah, just what a massive change for them.
Yeah, and what strikes me as most remarkable through all of that is just how much they've been able to do on such a relative pittance of an income. My father is an accountant, but has always been the kind of individual, not through choice, but through necessity, to play it safe. So he has never been able to do what he has allowed me to do, and what he's allowed me to do by virtue of his hard work and building solid foundations is to experiment and fail a fucking lot of times. And even when I was £100,000 plus down, it never really scared me. Not because I had a safety net, but just because it never really scared me, because my family's life was not on the line. So Dad's had to always play it safe. So to the point where he would not put forward for promotion, because for him it was about keeping his head down, doing as much with the small amount of money that he could, and just getting on with it, and not going for promotion in case his manager thought that he didn't like his job. And that's a questionable approach to life, certainly. But actually, it's what he had to do. And what he's been able to do on a very small income in putting 3 kids to university, actually put my brother and my sister through 2 degrees. I was never smart enough to have 2 degrees. So I barely got 1. But he put us all through university. He gave us deposits for our first houses. All of this stuff that he's been able to do has been a huge inspiration for me in our kind of make, manage, multiply modeling. Everything that we teach now in terms of using the markets to play the long game, and it's not what you make, but it's how you manage it and how frequently you multiply it. All of that comes from what I saw in front of my very own eyes with Dad doing with a relatively tiny income. But put it this way, I earned 3 times as much in my first year of employment after university than he earned in his highest paying job ever. And when you look at those kind of numbers, and you see that in the period it took me to accumulate quite fastidiously and quite professionally, I might add, over £100,000 worth of debt, in that same period, he just ploughed away and saved and invested and saved and invested and sacrificed. And I remember a time he walked into my apartment, and an apartment that he paid the deposit on, by the way, beautiful lakeside bachelor pad. And he walked in, and I had all my shoes lined up along the right hand side. I live a fairly minimalist life now, but back then it wasn't quite the case. I had all my shoes lined up, and he looked at all these pairs of shoes, each of which are whatever they were, all bought on credit cards, by the way. And he looked at those shoes and said, do you know what, Dillon? He said, you've got at least 10 times more pairs of shoes. I had about 30 or 40 pairs of shoes than I've had in the last 10 years. And it's true. He told me about how he'd had, I think, something like 3 pairs of shoes in the last 10 years that he just consistently got rehealed and resold. And in fact, the pair of shoes that he was wearing at the time were whatever, 4, 5 or 6 years old, and just rehealed and resold. And I thought I misheard him, and I was being a bit facetious, but it was like, did you say 3 pairs of shoes in the last 10 years, or did you say 3 pairs of shoes in the last season? And it was just, again, another remarkable insight into a man who has beaten the odds of poverty and beaten the odds of kind of wealth creation. And one of the reasons I feel so strongly now about this idea that everybody who's listening to this podcast, anybody who lives in a remotely developed country, why I feel so passionate's the wrong word, but why I feel so overzealous perhaps about the idea that we have a moral imperative to create wealth and redistribute it is exactly because I've seen my dad do huge amounts with such a small amount of money. My dad couldn't make the choices that you and I can make. My dad didn't have the connections and the connectivity, whether that's internet connectivity or networks that you and I have. My dad wasn't able to take any level of collective responsibility for the way the world was in his time or is in our time, because he just could take an individual responsibility to help his family.
Okay.
In our world, we can make those choices. We have that connectivity. We can take collective responsibility. I think those three things give us a real moral obligation to create wealth and redistribute it.
Perfect time to move into the middle bits, Dillon. Because I'd like to ask you in a moment about social responsibility. I'd like to ask you, how you got into over six figures debt. That'd be an interesting one. And some of those great things we're doing around wealth creation. But first, are you ready for the middle bits?
I'm ready for the middle bits.
What's your number one tip for a fulfilled life?
Focus on your vital energy first. So vital energy I define as your mental, physical, spiritual and emotional health. Emotional as in emotional IQ, emotional intelligence, EQ. If you focus on your mental, physical, spiritual and emotional health, your vital energy, you can go into your service energy with a lot more vigor. So your service energy is your vocational, your financial, your social and your charitable powers. So your vital energy is the foundation for everything you do in that service side of your life, vocational, financial, social and charitable. So often we kick straight into financial, trying to build our financial power, or in my case, trying to build your charitable power, and you just don't have the mental, physical, spiritual or emotional health to serve that sustainably. Does that make sense?
Yeah, easy. And then it's easy to crash if you've jumped right into servicing without actually keeping your own levels of energy, full or brimming. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, absolutely. And to sum that up, you can't give what you don't have.
Yeah, indeed. As you said, a poor man can't help a poor man.
Correct.
So, we talk about coaches and mentors and so on. And as I mentioned in the bio, in the intro here, you are to me, even though we've never actually met face to face, which we will, I guarantee that. I see you as a mentor. Whose work has influenced your work, Dillon?
So, I've really struggled to find any one individual whom I've been inspired by a lot of people, but I've struggled to find one individual who I think, do you know what, you are exactly what I want to be or what I need. And I've taken my influences, I guess, from a number of people. So I love Vivekananda for his selflessness, for example. I love Kissinger for how on point he is with kind of his geopolitical influence. I love Gandhi for his kind of tenacity, his commitment, his self-sacrifice. Who else? But I guess Musk for his, visionary thinking and his ability to bounce back from adversity. So there are, I think, so many individuals. And every time I dig a bit deeper into, my kind of spiritual learnings, for example, something else comes up that I just think, wow, that's massively influential. So I guess it's a number of people across that kind of social, philanthropic, commercial spectrum. If that's not too wishy-washy an answer. It's
wanky enough. We'll keep it. Just kidding. It's great. It's good answer.
No, not at all, bro. Not at all. I love you. I absolutely love you. Go for it. Next one.
So what would you say is a really important lesson that you've learnt that perhaps wasn't taught to you in school, other than how to fail German?
Do you know, the biggest lesson, I think, of my life is you can't give what you don't have. I mentioned it earlier, but if I was to focus in on the thing that got me into the biggest amount of shit and focus in on the thing that has got me the highest levels of success and acclaim, it's that sentence: you can't give what you don't have. So when I was in massive trouble, it was because I was giving what I didn't have. And when I've had huge amounts of success, it's been when I've focused in on that notion that, look, this is not the time to give, or certainly this is not the time to give that much. And as long as I hold that close to my heart, I can be selfishly selfless. Does that make sense? I can stick very closely to the end game, or I can keep my heart on the end game, which is redistributing £1 billion from the top 1% to the bottom 1%. I can keep my heart glued on that end game, but be selfish in the short term in not giving what I don't have. So yeah, that's for me has been the biggest learning that I've learned through experience. You can't give what you don't have.
Yeah, and there's nothing selfish about putting your oxygen mask on first before helping others, as they say, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that we all understand that in principle. And I think that the oxygen mask analogy, metaphor, simile, I failed English as well, so I'm not really too sure what it is. But I think the oxygen mask metaphor is a great metaphor. But I think you have to feel what it feels like to have given too much, whether that's time, energy, money. I think you have to feel what it feels like so that you can never feel like that again.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so that you can really be selfish in order to be selfless, but without the associated guilt. Because that's the place, I think, where I've got to now. And that's the place where we want to bring all of our legacy makers community to, which is to understand that not giving, when it is accompanied by guilt of not giving, it defeats the object.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's time, that's money, that's energy. So, for example, if I can't give my mother time that she might need for something because I need to devote my time at that point to something else, if I feel guilty for the duration of time that I'm not with her, then I'm not focused on what I ought to be doing. Does that make sense? And if I start thinking about, my time with mum's going to run out and so on and so forth, and if I'm consumed by guilt, I might as well have spent that time with her in the first place. So this idea of putting your oxygen mask on first, I think is great, but I think that should be supplemented with put your mask on first and don't feel guilty about it.
Yes. Yeah, good answer. The final question of the middle bits is, if you could choose a word, if you could choose one word of intention for your coming 12 months, so, like you said, you've been through a bit of a transitional mindset recently. So what word would you choose to set your intent for the coming 12 months?
That's a tough one. And having talked about you can't give what you don't have, actually my one word is quite the opposite. My one word is as cliche and as twee and as ridiculous as this sounds, is contribution. And I'll tell you why that is. So back in March, this was the beginning of a period of time between March and May where I like I said earlier, I haven't felt that low for at least 10 years. Back in March, I was invited to dinner with a charity who I care a great deal about. It's a charity called World Reader, and it was set up by two guys, David Risher and Colin McHugh. And David Risher worked with Jeff Bezos at Amazon. I think David took Amazon with Jeff from, I think it was 18 million to 4 billion, and then sold out a while after that. So very influential in Amazon's early stage growth, and is given accolades by Jeff Bezos to that extent. Anyway, so David sells out of Amazon, meets Colin McHugh. Their children went to the same school. And he and Colin set up World Reader. And what World Reader do is it sits really tightly with my intention of, one child, one school. So every child of school age should have a school in their pocket, one child, one school. And World Reader distribute reading devices to schools across the world. Amazing work. Anyway, so I get invited to dinner. They want to launch in Gambia, and they need a kind of a lead benefactor, is that the word? They need somebody to fund the project. And it's not a massive amount. It's about $150,000 for the first round. And so obviously, I have a relationship with these guys. I've spoken to them about doing some really big stuff with them. This is what they pitched me with. It was Colin and a wonderful lady called Ruth. And they pitched me over dinner for this project. And it broke my heart not to be able to fund that project. Had they asked me a couple of years ago. So between 2013 and the middle of 15, when things were on a high, going phenomenally well, we'd built a business from nothing to over 7 figures in less than 18 months. It was a phenomenal time. That amount would have been pocket change. And, they were planning on my 40th birthday, which was in May, they were planning to get me over to Gambia and meet the education minister and go and tour all the schools where we were going to be distributing reading devices to. And, it was going to be a brilliant week. And the launch of the project was going to be on the Friday of my 40th birthday. Honestly, Paul, that is fucking dream come true stuff for me. Amazing. And and it pains me to admit this, but I will anyway, because I think it's useful. Mate, I cried the whole fucking way home. And I remember moving. I'd had a seat in the first class carriage on the train home from London King's Cross back home. And I remember moving from my seat in first class to a seat in economy, because I sat there thinking, you don't deserve to be even sitting in these seats. Like, what a dickhead. How could you have given up all of that success back then and not been able to take advantage, in inverted commas, of this opportunity now? And why did you make those decisions? And what an idiot you are. And how are you ever going to recover from this? And between March and May, I went lower and lower and lower and lower and deeper into these feelings of self-loathing and frustration and anger. And I'm very introspective. So I kind of don't let it out, but I go quiet, I go silent. I can't talk, I can't think, I can't do anything. And the decision to let go of this pseudo-moral badge of honor about hating traders and hating the financial services market and all of that stuff was made at the beginning of May, because I thought that's the only thing I can do. And I read, in that period of time between March and May, I read as much literature on happiness as I possibly could. I don't know if you know Mo Gawdat, who is he's just kind of ex-Google, launched the whatever it is, the Happiness Project. His book is Solve for Happiness. So I read Solve for Happiness. I read The Happiness Advantage. I read The Happiness of Pursuit. A whole load of stuff on happiness. And then decided at the beginning, I also, by the way, got in touch with spiritual healers and card readers, and I had Skype sessions with, spirit guides, all this crazy stuff. And everything pointed me in the direction of kickstarting our trader training academy again and going back into the markets myself. And the level of success that I've had since May in the markets, but also in teaching others how to trade the markets, is even bigger and better and more sustainable than it was in 2013 to 15. And I know now that we can experience even quicker success now. Now's the right time. I've had the learning. I'm going into this now guilt-free. I'm going into this with a system that will work for the majority of people, that hasn't got, the kind of the time restrictions that the old strategy had. 2 hours on a Monday morning is a very low risk strategy, et cetera, et cetera. My point is that all of that leads me to knowing that contribution is where we want to be. And I guess if there was ever a goal, it would be to be able to fund a project of the size of Gambia within the next 12 months. And I'm really confident that we can do that. Because your mission is, as you mentioned, you sort of touched on it earlier, we haven't really talked on it a hell of a lot, but creating 10,000 millionaires, right? And then you're distributing that wealth to the lower 1%. So tell me about the project you're on now. Tell me about the trading project, because I'd like to hear about how you're doing that. So in essence, what we really need is, first of all, in terms of the kind of individuals that we need, what we need to bring, we need to bring these very spiritual, non-material individuals closer to the end of the spectrum that says money is okay, and collectively we need to return money to its rightful place as the most powerful force for good on the planet. That's what we need to do. And that makes money okay. And for many years, I rejected money, I rejected financial services, etc., etc. So we need to work with these spiritual individuals to bring them closer to the end of the spectrum that says money is love. It's the most powerful force for good in the world. And at the same time, we need to bring the kind of the hardcore capitalists also closer to that end of the spectrum that says, actually, it's absolutely fantastic to get rich and live a rich life, but it is disastrous to die rich. And so I need to do everything I can to make sure that I redistribute as much of my income before I pass as I possibly can. That's a tough sell, by the way, to hardcore capitalists, and it's a tough sell to a lot of people in the financial service industry, but no harder, by the way, than speaking to somebody who rejects money and trying to bring them closer to the end of the spectrum. So both are as hard as each other. Mm-hmm. And along the way, we find a small collective of individuals who share my thoughts that money is the most powerful force for good on the planet, and that it's okay to make money with the sole intention of making difference. So that's the kind of they're the individuals we're going for, and that's what we want to do on a consciousness level, to shift consciousness. How we're doing that through strategy and through system is teaching people how to trade the markets in a way that does not require them to predict where the market is going to be, but rather in a way that requires them to predict where the market is not going to be. I'll give you a really, really quick example. So it's the difference between saying, if you see a fly buzzing against a window, so you see a fly and it's trying to get out the window. And if you and I are standing in front of this window watching this fly, and I said to you, Paul, predict where the fly is going to land next, your chances, the probability of you getting that right are really slim. Like, it's a fucking lottery win for you to get that right. And this is how most people trade the markets. But how professionals trade the markets is to say, I'm going to predict where the fly is not going to land. And if I said to you, Paul, predict where the fly is not going to land, you could pretty much close your eyes, point to a spot on the window, and be virtually right. And so, as I was saying a few minutes ago, around the middle of May, just before my 40th birthday, I had to do something. And that's when I credited a real money trading account with a small amount of money to start trading this strategy. And I did a 90-day trial before I launched the program to show that this is how trading really works in the professional world. And, we did 42 trades. I got 41 wins. We got an average of 2.6% growth per week. And as I said earlier, this is what tends me to know now that we have something that is hugely scalable, that anybody can do. It takes a couple of hours on a Monday morning when the options market opens. And that's how we will go out there and beat the odds of creating millionaires. And look, this is not overnight. And even my goal is a lifetime goal. This 10,000 millionaires, I understand, is a ridiculous amount of millionaires to want to create. I get that it is just ludicrous. I feel sometimes embarrassed about even saying it, which is why I haven't mentioned it during the podcast, because it is slightly still embarrassing to say that that's what we want to do. But I know we can do it. And I know that give me 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, I know that we can do that. And I know that we can redistribute this income. And I think we'll get there sooner. But yeah, it doesn't stop me being ever so slightly embarrassed even to talk about it.
The funny thing is, I learned this on a property course a while ago, that when you're putting in a low offer, I mean, it's slightly out of context, but if you're putting in a low offer, if you're not embarrassed doing it, then don't bother, So... Yeah. Just be embarrassed about it, but say it anyway. Why not? It's sort of that 10x concept, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. In fact, funny you should say that about property. So I don't make my money in property, but that's how I manage and multiply my money. So we've got gratefully have been able to build a fairly sizable portfolio over the last few years. My wife and I, and my dad. Just not to come back to my dad too much, but I absolutely love him to pieces, and my mum. My dad took us from a 3-bed, semi-detached house that we'd been given by the council when they first moved to this city in 78, and in 1994 moved us to kind of metaphorically and physically the other side of the tracks, to one of the nicest parts in the city. And he bought a 6-bedroom detached house, a couple of garages, nice bit of land, beautiful property. And I used to accompany him to all the initial viewings, and I just loved hanging out with him. And he never said much. He's a very, very quiet man. He would never sit down and teach you anything. You just had to watch him. I think Gandhi said that the man with the quietest voice has the loudest mind, and that really is my dad. So I don't know where that places me, by the way. I'm quite the fucking opposite. Anyway, he would go in with these offers for, at that time, 120, 130,000 pound family homes. And he would go in with offers of £80,000 in cash, because that's what he'd been able to save. And he had no embarrassment, and he got rejected. He was looking for a house for around 7 years and just kept getting rejected over and over and over again. And gradually, as he began to save more money, was able to increase his offer. And in the end, he got this, I think the house was on for about 138 or 139,000 pounds. It was a 6-bedroom detached, double garage, etc., beautiful family home. And he got it for something like £94,000. And that was such another example, an unspoken lesson of sticking to what you want to do and not being embarrassed and not being afraid of rejection, and taking rejection really as par for the course. Phenomenal. So anyway, I guess just to pick up on that property metaphor.
That's great. Now, I just remembered I did say I'd ask you about social responsibility. I want to get an understanding. We've probably got about just a few minutes left. I won't hold you back too much. But
is that your subtle way of saying make this quick, Dillon?
Keep to the point.
I love you.
No, actually, I've got another interview in 30 minutes. So,
okay.
Yeah, it's interview mad.
Oh, I'm kidding, man. I'm absolutely kidding. Fair play.
We could just go on for hours, I reckon. But what is social responsibility? Could you maybe just outline it? I mean, it's a massive question. What is social responsibility? Because I'd like people listening to understand, and you've touched on it really well in that you said, don't give what you haven't got. I think that was your words, right? But how can people be socially responsible? So
I guess from my own perspective, I try not to tell anybody what to do or how to do it. I feel leading by instruction gets you nowhere, but maybe leading by inspiration can work. So the way that we do it, and the way I do it, and the way I teach our traders to do it, and the way that we do it at Legacy Makers, is to say, look, there are at the moment 17 Sustainable Development Goals that are identified by the United Nations as humanity's biggest challenges. And they are, divided into all sorts of different categories. And I would urge anybody listening to just have a look at these goals. So if you go to sdg.un.org, or if you just type in Sustainable Development Goals UN, you'll see a beautiful pictogram, 17 coloured squares of the Sustainable Development Goals.
We'll get them in them in our show notes, Dillon, so people can link.
That'd be fantastic. Yeah, that'd be really, really helpful. So what I would suggest is to have a look at these goals and pick one or pick two or pick three, investigate them further, really get to know them and understand exactly what the challenges are, understand exactly what the potential solutions are, really get clued up and educated on one or more of these goals. So that would be the first step. And the reason that that's the first step is so that you can then be much more effective in your giving. So one of the things I did really badly in the past is gave without the knowledge of how to give. So I would give to charities and NGOs and even private companies, entrepreneurs. And I would give based on how much I liked that individual, or how much I was brought in by the mission, or how much my heartstrings were pulled. And so I would give tens and tens of thousands of pounds away. And a lot of that debt was accumulated when I was volunteering for the United Nations in Rwanda throughout 2011. And I would just give money that I did not have to all of these organizations and charities and individuals. My mum had always taught me I'm a conduit of wealth. So I would borrow money from the banks and pass it down to these individuals. I was being a conduit of wealth. It's not quite what she meant. So first step, get really clued up on the challenges that appeal to you and on the solutions that respected individuals, respected organizations, research is showing that there are available to us. Second step, really understand how to give effectively. I mean, we're launching a course later this year as part of my intention to contribute. We're launching a course later this year. It's going to be a free course, and it's a course in effective philanthropy. How do you give effectively? How do you assess the ability of the recipient, the beneficiary of your money? How do you assess their ability to deliver a social and commercial return on your money? So that's research, then understand effective philanthropy. And thirdly, I firmly believe that the future is in venture philanthropy. I firmly believe the future is in this amalgamation of venture capitalism and philanthropy. So philanthropy. So what I do is look for profit generating individuals or companies that are addressing one or more of the UN Sustainable Development Goals to invest my money into. And we're building, in essence, a library of these individuals and companies. So these are anyone from companies who are using the waste from beer production to create the in essence, the plastic ring holders for beer cans. Then they're not plastic, obviously, biodegradable, edible by seabirds and all that kind of stuff. They can, it can be those individuals. It can be, I know that there's a couple in India who are making edible cutlery. So it can be companies, it can be individuals, or it can be, huge international projects like this big vacuum cleaner in the sea, which is, sucking up all the plastic debris. So it can be any end of the spectrum. So step one, really research the goal that you are most attracted to trying to help solve. Step two, understand effective philanthropy. How do you assess the ability of the beneficiary to deliver a social and commercial return? And step three, find individuals, companies, local, international, global, who are engaging in activity that delivers both a social and a commercial return. So that what you're not doing is throwing money into an endless pit because the company or the individual or the charity that you're giving to isn't geared to create a profit. Does that make sense?
Absolute sense. Absolute sense.
So in my mind, it's less social responsibility and much more collective responsibility, a responsibility to be venture philanthropists. Understand the problem, understand effective philanthropy, and then find beneficiaries who are crossing that commercial and social spectrum, if you like.
Dillon, Dhanecha, it's been my absolute pleasure. I wish we could talk for longer. Thank you so much for coming on and joining me.
Oh, no way, man. Thank you for having me. It's I'm just so pleased to have been invited on and to have got the chance to share time and love and knowledge and words with you. So yeah, I hope we can do it again soon. I hope we can do it in person. But until then, I love you very, very much and wish you the very best of luck, my brother.
Love you too, man.